I'm Riley,
And I'm Ronnie,
and this is the Plan to Eat podcast.
where we have conversations about meal planning, food, and wellness to help you answer the question, what's for dinner? Hello, welcome back to the Plan to Eat podcast. Today, Riley and I are going to be talking about meal planning for vacation. We had a dinner dilemma that was all about this. I think it might have been our very first dinner dilemma question. And I feel like we had so much to say. So we just decided to do a whole episode on it. It feels like a very opportune moment to talk about meal planning for vacation since we are on the cusp of summer vacation for most people. I think we're going to break it down to tips for before you leave for vacation, tips for while you're on vacation, and tips for after vacation.
Well, I'm over here grinning, which no one can see because this is a podcast, but you might be the kind of person who's hearing this and saying, who in the world meal plans on vacation? Isn't that what a vacation's for? Not meal planning.
So
And
true.
I don't disagree, but I think every trip you take is different. And not every trip I take is one where I'm completely free from cooking.
I think, though, that this is why it's important to think about the before you leave for your trip situation. So I have a couple things to talk about with this related to this. One of the ideas of before you leave for your vacation is to plan some meals for post-vacation before you even leave. My husband and I recently went on a 1-week vacation, and I did this, and I was so grateful to my past self when we got back from vacation. I only put like 3 meals on the meal plan. It wasn't anything special, but just having that jumping off point where the next day after we got home, I could go to the grocery store and, just buy the things that we needed for those few recipes. It made it so much easier to just like get back into the groove of life. I didn't have to sit there and look at my phone and be like, I have no idea. It was the best move ever. I think everybody needs to do that. If you're going on vacation and you're making your current meal plan, just add a couple recipes for after. Even if you change those recipes around or delete the ones that you put on your meal plan, at least at that point, you're not just like staring at a blank page kind of a thing. You have a little bit of something to build off of, and you can either say, this recipe doesn't actually sound good anymore. I'm going to swap it out for this one. At least you have that idea in your head, because otherwise you just end up sitting there being like, I have 0 ideas, and that feels bad.
Yes. So, yeah, mostly I want to go on vacation when I get back. I'm like tired from my vacation. The last thing I want to do is make a new meal plan. So doing it on the front end, it's just a little save. It's like a little piece of candy for your future self. Like I did this thing, then you just go to the grocery store. Putting things in the freezer, I feel like that stuff is fine, but I feel like usually I feel like just pre-meal planning for when you get back is the best way to do it. Potentially having something to eat when you get back is great, because who wants to go straight from the airport to the grocery store? Nobody. So having something at home is super helpful. Often what we do before we go on vacation is we eat everything we have. We have no eggs left. We have no vegetables left. Every apple, like all those kinds of things, like everything we ate, everything we had in our fridge is pretty much gone. So I do try to have some things in the freezer that are easy to pull out and eat. Maybe even like some kind of like breakfast sandwich, like microwavable breakfast, something or other. Not the greatest, but at least it gets us through when we get back.
Yeah, so that was another suggestion that I had for before you leave for your trip is have like number one, if you're creating your meal plan, maybe plan less than you would normally plan, just so that way if you do have leftovers or something, you're not left with a bunch of extra food in your fridge or just like random stuff that you're throwing in the freezer that you might not ever pull out and eat. And I think it's really good to then have like a fend for yourself kind of a night. Maybe the night before you leave for vacation, it's just like, we're eating the random stuff that we have. We're reducing the amount of waste as much as possible. I think especially if you're leaving for an extended period of time. If you're just leaving for a long weekend, I think a lot of stuff is going to stay good. But if you're leaving for an extended period of time, I would just try to purge as much as possible. And when you're making that meal plan, I would recommend thinking about the type of produce that you're putting in your recipes. So maybe don't buy the really delicate leafy greens and cilantro and those things if you know you're not potentially going to eat them all. I would say get things like cabbage and carrots and stuff that can stay in your refrigerator for a week and not go bad because it's heartier vegetable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do the same thing, the fend for yourself kind of thing. Usually I'll try to keep like depend on when we're leaving for the trip, right? And all of this is all a planner's dream, right? You
Yeah.
and I are planners. So look at the calendar and we say, okay, we're leaving Wednesday night for this trip, which means that the week ahead has to be planned accordingly. The vegetables we buy need to be used up. We don't want to overbuy. And so if this is not like your forte, just maybe giving it a little bit of forethought, it is helpful. So like hopefully this is one of those like pushes in the right direction for people who aren't as planner centric as you and I are, because we know we're leaving on Wednesday, which means that single egg can't be in our fridge the entire week. It has to be eaten or I'll boil it. So I take it with me on the road trip to the airport or whatever. But I am the same way. I'll plan just a few things and then the night before is going to be, okay, we've got yogurt. So someone's having a yogurt bowl. We got berries. Those have to be eaten. And you can make a conglomeration of a dinner just to get us through
Yeah.
because I don't want to leave anything in the fridge while we're gone.
You're so right that this is just like, I almost like relish in this because I do love planning, but it is this idea that we've talked about multiple times where like you have your day that you're leaving for vacation, just work backwards from it to if you're leaving in a week, like just work backwards from the day to try and like figure things out. I have had this, it's silly to say it's an epiphany because it's the stuff that we say all the time, but I have like a phrase for it right now that feels like my epiphany, which is that easy doesn't happen on accident, right? Easy comes with intentionality and that like planning ahead, like your life is easy when you actually go through these steps and do these things. So just think about that. Easy is not accidental. You have to like put in a little bit of work and then things get easy.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. And it makes so much sense, right? Like, we're going to get back from our trip and my meal plan's going to already be made. Why? Because I did it before I left. So
Yeah.
my life is easier when I get back, that it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a happenstance. It wasn't that I just walked in the grocery store and the grocery store gave me the food that I was going to eat. I had to do the work for myself. I love it. Easy doesn't happen on accident. That is so accurate.
All right, let's move on to meal planning during vacation. If this happens to be a vacation that involves meal planning, not we are taking a vacation from meal planning. It's not necessarily just meal planning though. Like I'm kind of personally considering this just like ideas for while you're on vacation. I think the dinner dilemma that we answered, the person mentioned that I think her mother-in-law brings like spices to them with them when they go on vacation. And so that made me think of the idea that like if I'm driving somewhere and we're staying at a homestay, I pretty much always bring my own chef's knife because I've rarely ever stayed at a homestay where they had quality cutlery. And to me, that's like the most important part of cooking is like I get really frustrated when the
Good
knife is bad. So you could also bring, any of your own small utensils like that just like make you a happier person when you're cooking. And so I kind of consider that part of this like during travel situation.
Yeah, that's great. I have done this in a variety of ways. We went to Hawaii one time and ate out every meal. And we came back and we said we will never do that again because it was so expensive. It felt like we were constantly eating because you go from one restaurant, you do an activity, then it's restaurant time again.
Yeah.
And we didn't enjoy that. And so we just basically walked away from that trip and we said, we've got to do it differently the next time. What can we do different? So we rented a house. The next time we went to Hawaii, we rented a house with a kitchen. I think it was actually a condo. So like a tiny little condo with a kitchen. And our planning wasn't extensive because obviously you don't want to buy too much that you throw away half the stuff you buy. But we just determined that we were going to eat out for dinner every night. That was set. And then beyond that, we said, okay, we want to have a couple of lunches on the beach. So let's get a little bit of sandwich stuff. And then I think we chose like 3 out of the 5 days we would have breakfast at our condo. So we just got just enough, which is why the planning was helpful because we didn't buy more than we needed. We just had enough for the days and the meals that we planned, we went to the grocery store and spent just a little bit of money on those things, and it covered us and helped the trip feel just like, I don't know, feel more relaxing, honestly,
Yeah,
but easy to happen on accident.
that's right.
Mm.
Yeah, I think one thing that's good if you're planning on cooking at like an Airbnb or something, or whatever, if your hotel is the type of hotel that has a like a suite, with a kitchen in it, check in first and see what kind of stuff is available already at the place. Like, is there salt and pepper and olive oil, whatever, some like basic things already at the place, or are you going to need to furnish it with literally everything? And then I think it's just kind of like you pick some basic staples and make sure you have some of those basic staples. So that way you're not going to cook dinner and you're like, oh, well, we don't have any butter or we don't have any olive oil. Like, we can't actually make this thing very easily because it's all going to stick to the pan.
Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. And I've definitely gotten myself into trouble where I go back to the Airbnb and there's nothing.
Yeah.
There's no, cooking spray or anything along those lines, no oil. And I probably wouldn't want to use them if they were there. So like buying your own is better. And ever since like I made the mistake, I've done a better job of saying, okay, we at the minimum need some butter, because
Yeah.
you can use that for such a variety of.
Yeah, I think exactly what you said is really good, of like leaving room for going out to eat. Most of the time we go on vacation, we want to experience whatever the local restaurants are. And so if you are doing some meal planning for a vacation, make sure that you're not planning every single meal or every single thing. And like you said, you even left room in breakfast. I mean, I love going out for breakfast, so I always leave room for going out for breakfast. But I think I would err on the side of planning less and then potentially needing to just like do a quick run to the grocery store if you don't feel like going out to eat that night, or just getting pizza or something instead. I think it's better to err on the side of a little less when you're on vacation.
Yeah, absolutely. We take an annual trip to Moab every year. And this is like, if you've never been to Moab, it is, we take our Jeep or our Razor and we go and rock crawl or bicycles. I think you bike when you go hiking. Like it's an activity centered vacation spot.
Yeah.
We don't usually go for very long. It's not terribly far from where we are. So we'll go for 4 days or a long weekend or something like that. But almost every time we rented a house, and we've actually taken pre-made meals, like homemade meals, taken them. I've done breakfast casseroles. I've done like hamburger patties frozen, so you can just throw them on the grill at the house or in a pan at the house. And we do this with other families, some good friends of ours. So we'll split the food so that they do some and we do some. And then you just take a bunch of sandwich stuff or wrap stuff for lunch so that while you're on the trail or hiking or biking, whatever you're doing, your lunch, you can pack it. And so that does mean we're taking and packing coolers with us, but it has honestly made those trips amazing. And so again, that's just pre-prepping all this food, putting it in the freezer, or, making patties, put it in Ziploc bags, those kinds of things. And it's worked out really well for us. And it doesn't take away from the trip because you can relax at the end of the night. That part of the work is done. You just throw something in the oven or on the grill. And I don't know, I know that sounds like a lot of effort, but it really does make the trip more enjoyable.
Well, and if you do it in the same way that you often batch cook, we talked about this in the last episode, where you just make an extra portion of whatever you're eating and then it either goes in the fridge or the freezer, that's a whole meal that you would just bring with you. Maybe you save it in an aluminum foil tin instead of saving it in like your glass Pyrex or something. And I think this is also a good opportunity to bring some of those staples items with you. So like, if you like half and half in your coffee, well, it can be you may not want to go to the grocery store and buy a whole new thing, a half and half, if you still have a half a quart of it at your house or something. So that way you're also not wasting some of the things that you have at your home too. You can just, we have extra grapes. Let's just bring them with us, like somebody will eat them at some point.
Absolutely. So another example of meal planning on vacation, my entire family, so there's like 16 of us. I think it was 16. Could be wrong on the number, but it was quite a few people. We all went to the beach and we had one beach house for all of us. Actually, I think it was 18 people. And we chose to do every meal at our Airbnb. And so I actually took on the meal planning portion. Who's shocked? Nobody. I took on the meal planning portion of this, and I was able to use Plan to Eat in the most functional way possible for vacationing. I added the meals to the planner, I set serving sizes, and we ate a lot of very basic meal, but the reason for that was that we didn't wanna go buy every spice because we flew to the beach that we all went to. And so I didn't wanna fly with spices, I didn't wanna have to go buy every spice and then throw them away afterwards. And so we did a lot of things like tacos, where we just bought a packet of taco seasoning to put into the meat that we used. We had things like spaghetti, where we had spaghetti sauce and pasta, and the meat that we used in the side salads, and, like, the 1 bottle of dressing that everyone used for the salad, like, those are the kinds of it was very basic, not super thrilling meals. They were great and they tasted great. They fed everyone from the pickiest to the least picky. But I would say, like, if you ever get into this situation, it actually went so smoothly that I actually took that role on. I did the shopping, I did a grocery pickup while we were at the beach, and it looked like we were feeding an army, but we were. But it worked really well, and I just, like, we just did very low level cooking. So, like, we did hamburgers, and I don't even know what we did. I think we even bought pre-made patties for that. So it actually worked really beautifully, and everyone was fed, and it was great. It worked great.
That sounds awesome. And I'm sure it was easier in Plenty because you just increased the serving sizes of all your recipes and then you got what you needed for 18 people.
Yeah, for, like, 5 days. So it was quite extensive, but it actually I mean, it's like a Planty success story, I would say. It went really well.
I love it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about meal planning, returning home from vacation. Say you didn't do your future self a favor and you did not add any recipes to your meal plan before you left on vacation. One thing that I have done, my husband and I went to Europe for 3 weeks a couple years ago, and I realized on the day that we were coming home that I had no recipes planned. I had no meal plan. I had not thought about meal planning for 3 weeks. We had been eating baguettes and pastries and schnitzel, and I had not thought about it at all. So what I did was actually while we were in the airport waiting to board our flight, I planned some recipes so that I had a few things ready by the time we got home. And the main thing that I did was I just kind of scrolled through my meal plan for what we were eating before vacation and was like, well, it's been 3 weeks since we ate that. I'm just going to replan it and it's going to be really easy.
Yeah, I would say I've done that plenty of times. I even made a comment earlier in this episode where I said, "You who wants to do that on the way home from the airport?" But I say that, and I'm guilty of that
Yeah.
almost every time. I am guilty of saying to my car full of my family, "Hey guys, what do y'all want to eat this week?" And everyone is like, "We don't want to eat ever again," because that's how everyone always feels at the end of vacation.
Yeah.
At least my family does, including me. So like, there's just this piece of like, oh, who you just can hardly get up the energy to do it. And so I often plan things that are tried and true. So, like, just like you said, you're going back in your meal plan, seeing what you're eating before vacation. I do the same thing. I'm like, well, I know we love this and that's easy to make. So I'm not going wild. But it usually also involves like going through my fridge and saying, we have no eggs, we have no condiments, we have no fresh fruit or fresh vegetables. So usually that grocery trip coming back from vacation is a pretty pricey one. And so some of the ways that I try to help myself with that, we touch on and talk about all the time, but that's going through my freezer and saying, what can I cook from what I already have? What do I already have in my pantry so that I don't have to go buy it again? Do I have some mayonnaise buried somewhere in here? Or do I have a frozen pizza? Like, because sometimes that's what you got to do. And we'll have the frozen pizza the night we get home or whatever the circumstances. But to cut down on those costs, going through my pantry, seeing what we actually have, going through my freezer and seeing what we could pull out to eat, it really does help cut back on some of those costs because I feel like it is the most expensive of the whole year is the trip when you get back from when you get back from vacation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that you touched on a good point there that this is something that I do when I guess this is kind of a pre-planning thing that I do before vacation, but it's for post-vacation, which is I make sure that we have some sort of really easy meal at the house, whether it is just a frozen pizza or it's like a staple recipe that comes together really easy with things that we already have. But a lot of the times from where we live, it's even further for you, Riley, but we live about an hour and a half away from the airport. And it's all just on the interstate. So it's not like there's a great place to stop and have dinner on your way home from the airport. And like you said, at that point in time, you're like, I'm kind of tired of eating out. I'm ready for just like a wholesome meal at my house. So I always make sure that I have something to eat at home. So that way I don't have to go to the grocery store immediately. It can at least wait until the next day. And I know you are a big fan of grocery pickup and delivery. So if you're somebody who is, if you're currently like making your meal plan while you're in the airport or you're in your car ride on the way home, you could also send it to grocery delivery and potentially your groceries will be there for you the same day that you get home.
I have done that. It just depends on how much cargo we have. I mean, this might sound like really obvious, but sometimes we stop at the grocery store and get a salad kit and a rotisserie chicken or some kind of instant rice. We don't usually do like the pre-made sides at the grocery store, but or maybe some fruit in a bagged salad and a rotisserie chicken. And that's what we have when we get home. And it is pre-cooked. I didn't have to cook it, but it just feels like a fresher meal than eating out at a restaurant, but it's at home.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I like that. One more thing that I think is just a way to make this simple in general is like creating a menu that's your after vacation, go-to meals. And maybe again, it's only 3 or 4 recipes, but you just know, like we come home from vacation, we need something that's a little more turnkey. I have this menu. I'm just going to add it to, you can add it to your meal planner either before you go on vacation or after you go on vacation. Doesn't really matter. It's just something you don't have to think about the meal planning process and you just do yourself a favor.
It's funny. The last time we got back from a trip, we pulled in the driveway. I go inside, we unload the car, and I felt myself shift into, we got work to do. Like I just felt myself shift into life mode. And, like looking at your planner, seeing what you have ahead, saying, okay, I'm going to plan around what we've got going on. Sometimes I have to get home to be able to get into that mindset and to be able to get into okay, man, our week is actually pretty busy. We're hitting the ground running from our vacation. You know what? It's going to be easy meal week.
Yeah.
It's going to be leftovers. It's going to be, let's like throw together a pot of chili. It's going to be those kinds of things. But I really, I love that, like getting home and looking at the planner, seeing what I've got going. How many days do I need to be at work this week? Do I have doctor's appointments for my kids? What does the school week look like? And really just trying to like plan around that. And I know we say this all the time, but planning around your life makes the plan more enjoyable, like if it doesn't stress you out that you planned a 2-hour dinner on a night you couldn't because you knew that you couldn't do that. And there's no shame in planning pizza night. Like there's just none. So just add it to the plan.
I love it. All right. Those were the tips that I had. Did you have anything else?
I don't. I'm good. I think that's
amazing. Well, let's answer a couple dinner dilemmas, but we might keep this episode just a little shorter. We answered a lot of dinner dilemmas last week. So if you haven't listened to that one, do check it out.
All right. From Jen. Sick with no backup plan. Last week I had a great menu planned. Unfortunately, it was pretty hands-on. My husband's help in the kitchen stops at the microwave, and I came down with a miserable 4-day fever, which meant cereal and pizza for the rest of my family. I need help building emergency meals into my meal plan.
Ooh, I like that. So I think we are a little bit of broken records, but there are a lot of tips that I think fit multiple situations. And one of them is the idea of like keeping your pantry meals on hand. You could consider these emergency meals instead, but like simple things that are like pasta, something that's like rice and black beans, or just items that like have just a few staples ingredients. You can always have them on hand, whether it's in your pantry or in your freezer, and things that are simple enough that if you're the main cook in your household, somebody else can easily prepare this recipe. Right? Like we don't want something that's like overly complicated or has too many steps, just in case everybody else in the family normally relies on you to do the cooking.
I know that you sent us this so long ago, but I feel for you and I'm so sorry that you were sick. But I think that it inspired in you something really profound, which is this idea of having something else. And you can't account for the things that went bad. And you know what? Life happens sometimes and we have to throw things away sometimes, no matter how much planning we do and how perfect our meal plan is or how perfect our portion sizes that we bought at the grocery store were. So, like, these are the time when you say, you know what? People ate food and they survived.
More than likely, your kids enjoyed eating cereal and pizza, let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, they probably did. I don't know how many people you're feeding over there, but I bet they didn't, even though you probably did. Yeah, so I mean, again, broken records, but having things in the freezer, this is whether it's a busy night and you just need something that you desperate, like whether maybe you've got a lasagna. You make a double batch of lasagna sometime and you just have it in there and it's the emergency lasagna.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a friend who has a crazy day and they need an emergency meal, or maybe your husband needs to throw something in the oven for you. Something along those lines is awesome. But it being fully cooked. So like this isn't like where we got parts that come together. Ronnie said, having like these pantry staple meals, that's amazing. Probably you can tell somebody, hey, open these 5 cans, dump them into the crock pot, and tonight you'll have dinner. You're
Yeah.
welcome. But then if with the situation that you're in where you said your husband is not a cook, doing a bit of batch work, maybe seasonally, where things aren't going bad in your freezer, but you've got a soup that he can heat up on the stove, or you've got a lasagna, like I said, or maybe you've got some kind of curry frozen, like all those kinds that are kind of year-round kind of foods. Maybe not ideal for a hot summer day, but at least nobody else had to cook it.
I love it. I mean, because we're talking about freezer meals, I just think about that idea of the freezer meal club. And so this
Mhm.
is obviously something that's like way ahead of time, like thinking way ahead of time. But, joining a freezer meal club where you get together and you exchange freezer meals so that way you have a wider variety of things in your freezer.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something that you do specifically in the fall or the early winter, since that often is the time of the year when we're uh, more likely to get an illness. And then you just have things, it's totally okay if they're in there for 4 months, and you maybe don't get sick until February or something, but that way you have like a good stock. And I think in general, like you're saying, Riley, most freezer meals like this, you just write on it like preheat oven to 350, throw it in for 45 minutes. Hopefully your husband can do that. I know you said that his cooking knowledge stops at the microwave, but I bet he can also figure out how to work the oven.
Yeah. Another thing that just came to mind is, and I don't know your family's eating preferences, but some kind of steamer bag of mixed veggies in your freezer. Some kind of maybe like a kielbasa or a smoked sausage in your freezer. Maybe a box of mac and cheese. Obviously, desperate times call for desperate measures, but you can steam those veggies in the microwave and the bag has instructions. You can chop that kielbasa up and heat it up on the stove. Those are pretty simplistic steps, but it does give you a veggie, a protein, a carb, and it's just something you have on hand that, I mean, it's not necessarily it is a full meal and it does require a little bit of work, but those are pretty basic steps I think someone could follow.
Yeah, totally.
All right, Susie is our next dinner dilemma. And she says, family disagreements. I have one picky family member. What happens on what happens on that Survivor show when someone gets kicked off the island?
Oh yeah, I think that's what they say, like you've been kicked off the island or something. Yeah.
Okay, I don't actually watch that show, but my mind immediately went to kick them off. Um, It's obviously not what I would do, but you might want to sometimes.
Yeah.
So this is hard. I would say my number one recommendation for this person is include them in the planning process.
Mm.
Have them say, I will eat this side dish and that side dish and this main, and like let them be a part of the planning process. And help them choose the things that go with the other things you're making, and just have them included and have them be a part of the planning process so that there's something that they will consume.
Yeah, that's a really great tip. And potentially, we mentioned this, I think, last time as well, having them potentially be a part of the cooking process as well, because as we learned through Katie, the more that someone who's a picky eater interacts with food, the more likely they are to try it. And so that interaction includes cooking. Plus, there's an element of like, you take pride in the things that you do. And so maybe this person can take pride in having helped made dinner, and they might be more willing to eat some things that they wouldn't have eaten before, or you just get some help in the kitchen.
Yeah, and I think that our minds immediately go towards that this is a child,
Right.
Um,
It might
I
not
have
be.
whose spouse is a highly picky eater, and they do have to work together pretty closely on, okay, I'm willing to eat this. I won't eat that, but I'll eat the other things you're making. And so kind of working together as a team and saying, I understand, but you are not going to change your mind on kale or Brussels sprouts. But I love that. So I'm going to make that, but I will make you green beans, or I will make you the side salad you like. And we can agree that we love hamburgers. So like we're gonna have hamburgers, we're gonna have grilled chicken, and we're gonna have pick the other main things that, main parts of your meal. But just kind of, I don't know, trying to include them and be like, hey, let's do this together. We have just different opinions. I'm willing to make you things you like, especially if this is an adult in this situation, someone who's not learning to eat. Because I think we look at kids and we think, okay, they're teachable and they
Hmm.
might aversion. They don't even know if they like it, but an adult may know. I actually do not like any of these things.
Yeah.
And it's not that they're not teachable, but it's just like they're adults. They can choose. But saying, hey, like let's try to do this together because we have very different opinions. So how can we unify on this front?
Great point. All right. I'm going to roll this one into the next one because Katie says she needs advice for keeping everyone on the same page. Hi there. I live in a multi-generational household with 3 adults. We are having an issue getting everyone on the same page with the meal plan. I will plan, but others will go off script, which often leads to too much or not enough thawed and ready to cook at dinner time. Any advice on low-tech ways to get everyone on the same page? So, I mean, my original advice was going to be like, make sure everybody's logged into your Plan to Eat account and everybody can see the meal plan. It's fairly low tech, but I understand that potentially in a multi-generational household, there could be somebody who doesn't even have a smartphone. Maybe that's advice for some of the members of the household, but I think otherwise, my recommendation would just be to do your best to have clear communication. And like, even if it has to happen every day and you just say, hey, like we're eating chicken tonight. So like the chicken needs to come out of the freezer, or I'm making chicken tonight. So don't take the hamburger out of the freezer.
Yeah.
uh, I think some clear communication like that, or even just like writing little notes, you could put sticky notes on the fridge that's like, or have like a whiteboard on your fridge that says what the meal plan is, right? Like if you meal plan and do everything in Plan to Eat because that's what's easy for you, but it's not easy for everybody else in your household, maybe the meal plan also has to go on the refrigerator, either printing it out from Plan to Eat or just handwriting it on a whiteboard or something. So that way everybody is more on the same page.
I know some people who live multi-generationally and they keep a whiteboard on the fridge with kind of a running, like, here's what we're having. There's a list on the fridge where everyone can say, hey, we need milk, or maybe this person drinks this specific kind of milk and this person doesn't, and they don't know when the other person runs out. So they have kind of a running family list. One way you could potentially get on the same page, if you're all together at breakfast, hey, that have that little planning time. Hey, I'm making chicken tonight, or I'm gonna thaw the chicken. Is everyone still good with the chicken?
Yeah.
And bought these meals worth of groceries. We can rearrange them, but we can't cancel them, right? Because then we'd be throwing food away. And just kind of having those check-in times. Maybe it's dinner. Maybe that's the meal you're all together, and you say, "Hey, tomorrow night we're having this. Everyone good?" Kind of having everyone have some buy-in and to say like, "Yes, I agreed to this yesterday." Another thing I could see being super helpful is having designated nights of the week where someone else is cooking. So maybe this is 3 adults. Maybe it's a couple and a grandparent, or a parents and a kid. We don't know the breakdown, but potentially maybe it's sisters and a mom. We don't have any clues here. But maybe let's say it's 3. Let's say it's 2 sisters and a mom. Maybe each one of those people have a different night of the week. So I've got Tuesdays and Thursdays. Sister has Mondays and Wednesdays. Mom has Saturdays, Sundays. And way like, this is what we have. I know that it's my day. I know I've got to get this meat thawed. That it doesn't have to be that specific, but you could have a breakdown where you say, okay, I am in control of this meal. I've got to plan it, purchase for it, and thaw it out and cook it. That might be a helpful tool.
Yeah, that's great advice. I really like the whiteboard situation because, like you said, then it can also account for your grocery list. And if you're doing your grocery list on your phone, you just quickly look at the whiteboard and add the things that you need so that everybody can get the same stuff. I think that's probably like the thing that might make this situation the least stressful.
I would say just like you had given this advice earlier, but you've just got to talk about it.
Yeah.
You just got to have times where you check in, and also it's gonna get messed up, and you're gonna have 3 different things falling on the counter, and
Yeah. Every once in a while
well,
that stuff happens. Yeah, no matter what household you're in, like it happened. We have 2 people in my household, and my husband will eat all the avocados. And then I'm like, we were having avocados for dinner.
absolutely. Yeah, it happens to all of us. Yeah. Multi-generational living is unique and special, and it's got its own challenges. So just making sure you're having those conversations so that like resentment doesn't build, I think is probably pretty helpful.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's wrap up with this question from Tim. Tim says recipes seem to be all over the place with their estimated cook times. It often takes me 30 minutes longer than the recipe says. My guess is it's either they don't include prep time, but they don't tell you that, or they calculate prep time according to a professional chef. How can I minimize the variance? I'm asking for all the hungry people waiting for dinner. Well, I've definitely been in a situation, Tim, where I thought a recipe. Well, actually, think I've ranted about this on the podcast before. There are so many recipes that are like, it's a 15-minute recipe, it's a 20-minute recipe. And you're like, heck no, it's not. That recipe took me 45 minutes because exactly like you said, that you have to chop all the things and make a special sauce, and none of the things can happen simultaneously. Maybe it does if you have a sous chef, but not little old me in my kitchen, in my little tiny kitchen. So I think the thing for this, a part of this is that it gets easier as you cook. And I'm sure it sounds like you're a seasoned cook, Tim, but for me, I feel like it gets easier to judge how long a recipe is going to take just by skimming it. The more that I cook, the more experienced I've gotten. It's easier for me to look at a recipe and be like, yeah, this says 30 minutes, but I kind of doubt it. I think it's going to take us more at 60 minutes to make this thing. And so maybe it's more just about kind of like curating your recipe book with the recipes that are actually 30 minutes, and you could create a tag or a course or something like that for like those nights that you definitely need a recipe that takes 30 minutes, right? There might be other times when it doesn't matter if a recipe takes you an hour because it's a Saturday or you just have nothing going on that night, but potentially that's like you need to have like, these are our tried and true, definitely know that they are quick recipes.
Mm-hmm. You touched on this, but I want to elaborate on it a little bit. Instead of looking at the cook time and the prep time, like instead of looking at those, I would read through the steps of the recipe and take that extra 5 minutes when you're planning it to see that it says, let sit overnight. Well, no one needs to see that at 6 o'clock. We need to have seen that yesterday, right?
Yeah.
And that's a dramatic example, but just you can see, okay, now you let the sauce sit while you cook everything else. Okay, well, you don't want to make the sauce last. You need to make the sauce first. So just reading through the steps, because that's where the specific details are going to live. And sometimes recipe websites, the cook time and prep time is auto-generated from what it gleans or doesn't glean from a recipe. And so you may just see, like it could be an AI gone wrong kind of situation where you put in this recipe and it didn't see that it said to sit overnight, or it didn't see that it said let rest, salt and let sit and get to room temperature. If you're like cooking some meat and it like says to get to room temperature, well, that's going to add a lot of time that wasn't accounted for in the prep time. So reading through the steps and seeing exactly how much time it takes to bake, exactly what you have to do, how many ingredients you have to chop, that's going to give you a better time. So I would say that sometimes these recipes that recipe authors are putting out, like it's not that they're professional chefs or that they estimated wrong. It could just be a glitch in like technology. And then lastly, I find because I live at a high altitude, things don't cook as quickly in my oven. Things don't brown as quickly as I want them to. It might take longer to cook. Like I might take longer. Literally takes longer to boil eggs than it does at a lower elevation. And so that's a really small, very nuanced detail, but it's just something that came to mind. Like it could be that where this person is cooking is a very different elevation than you are at. And so we're cooking, like you might be cooking something at 350 and so are they, but it's going to take quite a bit longer. I find that I have to add time to a lot of recipes And so it's just like a really subtle side note, but it's something that can really make a big difference.
That's a really great point. I was also just going to mention really quickly that if it feels like the prep time is the thing that's taking up so much of your time, which for me is like if things involve a lot of chopping of different vegetables, that often takes a long time. Maybe you set aside some time on the weekend to do a little bit of meal prep to enable your recipes during the week to come together a little faster. And you just have all of your onions for the week already diced. And so there's some of that work that's taken out of the equation on the actual night of cooking.
Yeah, that's a great idea also.
All right. Well, in our next episode, we are going to be starting our breakdown of our next book club book. So you can learn more about that on our Instagram. Go check out our post where we revealed what our book club breakdown book pick is. And
if someone has been listening to our show and they have a dinner dilemma that we have not yet answered, now we have probably about 60 left to go through. But if you have a dinner dilemma that has come up in your life, can people still submit their dinner dilemmas?
They can. I will have a link in the show notes of this episode to the Google form. It's just a quick form where you can literally write in your name and what your dinner dilemma is, and it'll get added to the bottom of our list. So if you have something that you're thinking about, if any of these questions that we've answered so far are sparking some things that you're realizing, oh, I didn't even realize that I was having this dilemma, we would love to hear about it and get these answered for you. We do have quite a few more to go through, but the goal is to get through them all.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Please share an episode with a friend or family member to spread the word about the podcast. And we will talk to you again in 2 weeks.